So before you actually have some really major chain related issues, there's an easy way to monitor the amount of stretch on the chain by using the diagnostic tool. In my case, I'm using OBD11, so I will need to head up to control units, engine, live data, and search for 039. Here you can see the phase position bank 1 intake, which should ideally be near 0 when the car is warmed up. If it's anything below -4, it means your adjuster is working overtime and you should really consider doing this job.
I needed to free up some space, so I started by pulling out the battery by disconnecting the terminals, removing the plastic trim, and lastly the 13mm bolt and bracket holding it to the tray. At this point we are only 3 really rusty 10mm away from freeing up the tray itself. Since I was already here, it was a good idea to replace the transmission mount as well, so I additionally removed the wiring harness casing. You can clearly see and hear how much this bad boy was worn out. After torquing everything to spec, I removed the noise pipe and the bolts holding the upper timing cover. Jumping on the right side, I removed the PCV valve as well as the high pressure fuel pump. I will link up another video for additional information on removing and reinstalling the fuel pump. Jumping behind, I also carefully removed the small bracket next to the N205 valve, and I say carefully because the connector on the valve tends to snap quite easily. To make some more space, we need to unclip and move this tiny wiring harness underneath the chain cover. At this point it was time to unplug and remove the coil packs with the spark plugs, which I marked to make my OCD happy. I loosened up the bolts and removed the 2 hoses in the back so I could lift and remove the cover. However, I would advise you to remove the hoses in the back first, just so you don't have to fight tug of war with the cover later. Here you can see the old gasket with all of its glorious crunchiness. Next up on the line is the timing chain cover, which is pretty straightforward since it's only held up with a few bolts and a vacuum hose which simply unplugs. And there it is with all of its glory. Pretty boring actually. The second task was locking the camshafts with the tool or vice grips, or in my case I chose both. And now comes the tricky part, removing the exhaust cam bolt. In my experience, this can only be properly done with the original socket, since the bolt is pretty shallow and if you strip it out you will be in a world of pain. After doing the equivalent of stopping world hunger, it's not a bad idea to treat yourself with a cookie. With the bolt removed, the cam adjuster together with the chain is free to go out. And last but not least, remove the tensioner. It's really important to remove the small oil strainer left on by the old tensioner, because on the new one it's also fitted, and by forgetting this you can starve the tensioner from lubrication. When refitting the chain, I find it the easiest by marking the 18th and 19th dots starting from the brass link, after which I simply transfer the marks on the backside. With the brass link facing away, I fitted the chain on the adjuster, with the adjuster notch being in the middle of our marks. Now there is a dot on the inlet cam that needs to slide on the brass link, and if your cam is moved you will need to push them back with the tool in order to make it fit. The torque sequence for the new bolt is 20 Nm or 15 foot-pounds plus 1/8 of a turn. What I forgot to mention is the 3 plastic O-rings on the adjuster valve that tend to fall apart when you remove the housing, so make sure you replace these as well. There we have it. Only thing left will be to change the fluids with the filters, after which the engine will be in perfect condition. Later I will be focusing on the suspension as well as the general appearance of the car. If you enjoyed, make sure you subscribe and not miss out on new episodes. Until next time.